Hello and welcome to The Art of Conversation, a radio show dedicated to a college course dedicated to the art of conversation. This program is brought to you by the Eileen G. Jones Honors College and the Department of Communication Studies, Media, and Journalism at Commonwealth University, Bloomsburg. I'm your host, Eric C. Miller, Professor of Communication Studies, asker of many questions, generally a very curious guy. Each semester I teach a class available in your course catalog as Honors 211, The Art of Conversation, that focuses on the ancient art of dialectic, that is, the collaborative process by which knowledgeable peers pursue the truth through focused question and answer. After a few weeks of wading through the theory on these matters, our students spend about 10 weeks in practice, holding twice weekly 75-minute deep dives into topics and questions of their choosing. Our theme this semester is the state of the earth and the good life upon it, granting students considerable leeway in their choice of content. Every week, twice a week, we're talking about how to live better lives on this planet. My guests today are Daisy and Angie, a pair of student moderators who this week asked our class to consider whether and how social media misinformation may pose a threat to democracy. Daisy, Angie, welcome to the program.
Hi.
So before we get started today, maybe it'd be helpful to learn just a little bit about you. Like, what year are you in school? What are your majors? What brought you to the art of conversation?
My name is Daisy. I am a senior here at Bloomsburg University, or Commonwealth University. I am majoring in business education, and I did this conversation class because I thought it would help me to become a stronger teacher, be able to use the skill in the classroom.
Can I ask quickly what you're planning to teach?
Like business classes, like accounting, personal finance, programming, robotics, stuff like that.
My name is Angie, and I'm a sophomore media journalism major. I took this class because I needed to fulfill my honors requirement, and I was already taking a communication class before, so I switched out of it once I saw that there was an opening in this class, so I figured I'd just step it up a little and put myself into a little bit of an uncomfortable situation, but for better knowledge.
Does speaking on the radio make you uncomfortable?
A little, but it's to get more comfortable with it.
Well, great. We're glad to have you guys. And it's worth noting here that you could have chosen any question, really, to discuss with our class this week, but you chose the question of whether or not social media misinformation might be a threat to democracy. And so that's what we'll dig into here today. I think it's useful, though, to start off with a little bit of definition, because that question contains a bunch of big words. And so first of all, I'm curious, when you think of social media, what pops immediately into your head? What social media do you consume?
I would consider like the mobile apps. I use Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, like a bunch of stuff like that. But also, like, I guess Google would count. You use that to look stuff up and you consume media on there. So that would go along with it. Just pretty much a broad basis of the information that's being put out there online. The apps that are throwing information out toward you.
And I have to say I agree with that. A lot of the social media, the apps that you have on your phone, examples, TikTok, Instagram, and those platforms. Google as well, because a lot of articles are written by people and you could just place any information out there. Sometimes I consider news in that as well, because some programs are they're not completely factual and they're opinion based, some of them. So just a lot of different media.
Part of the reason I ask is because I think there's an interesting generational divide here. Are you guys Gen Z? Is that what we're calling you?
Yes.
Okay. I am a millennial myself, and I'm old enough to remember the first social media platforms like MySpace, for example, that probably preceded you, I would imagine. But I went to college in an era with no social media. I didn't even have a cell phone when I was in college. And so my experience is very different, or must be. But when I did get on social media for the first time back in 2008 or so, I had a Facebook account. Later, I had a Twitter account. I currently have an Instagram account that's just like closed except to my friends and family. But it seems to me like most college students don't think of Facebook and Twitter first and foremost as social media platforms. They're not the most popular. Is that accurate?
I mean, Facebook was the first one that I had, but that's also because I was like younger. I probably shouldn't have been on Facebook just yet, but it was like the first one that was out there.
For me, Twitter/X, I've never actually even, I think I maybe made an account because it was for classes. I had to make a Twitter account, which was strange. But Facebook, I kind of see that as like my family social media. That's where I'll go if I want to see posts from my family. Like it's strange to say, but that's the family base. The Instagram and TikTok are kind of like my own kind of social media platforms that I go on my own.
Yeah, that's interesting. I remember when Facebook began as an exclusive to Harvard students so that Mark Zuckerberg could get a girlfriend. And then it expanded just to college students. You had to have a .edu email address to join. And then eventually over time, we reached a point where it's used primarily by like my aunts and uncles to sell stuff on Google Marketplace or Facebook Marketplace, you know. And what's interesting too is to me is that social media was social initially because it was connecting college students to each other in ways that they might not have been able to cross paths just walking around campus. But then eventually reached a point where we're able to talk about it as a threat to democracy, you know, and the evolution of a thing that intended to help a Harvard student meet girls led to a thing that could compromise the American system of government, which is a really remarkable thing. And given that college students these days primarily use TikTok, as I understand it, which is mostly just watching funny short videos, I don't know, how did we get here? How do you think about this? When you chose this as your topic, how could TikTok be a threat to democracy?
With the way that things have been going lately, I notice on social media that there are more and more articles out there, and it's getting harder to tell the difference between what's real and fake. Because someone will say one thing and another person will say something else, and you don't know which one to believe. You go to research it, but then there's articles for both sides. Like, which article do you pick? And there's also hate speech and mean things going on online too when people disagree with one another. So I noticed that that leads to increased violence in our world today, which kind of makes it worried because where else is it going to go from here?
When it started out, it used to be just to get to know people, but then once people got to know people through social media, it became very opinionated, and people got comfortable just sharing their opinions right out online, which causes other people who don't agree with the people posting the opinions to combat, to be aggressive, to defend what they are believing in. And it causes a big divide in the people that are trying to get to know each other on social media.
Yeah, I remember when Facebook first came out and I first joined it, I thought this is such a great platform. It's going to be so good for democracy because this is a place where you can connect with your friends and family or your friends of their friends and their family and share information. And in these comment threads, you can talk it through. You know, you can make points and counterpoints and share evidence and maybe encounter ideas that you wouldn't have encountered otherwise. And I thought it was just this wonderful thing. And in the years that followed, it proved to be the very opposite of that because so much that was getting shared on there was increasingly fringe and unreliable. And a lot of it was conspiratorial and a bunch of it just flat out wasn't true. And the users of it never really developed the sort of savvy to determine what's what. And I eventually left Facebook exactly for that reason. I felt like it was this constant feed of confusion and weirdness and negativity into my life. And eventually I left Twitter for the same reason. And so now I just share pictures of my kids with my cousins, basically. But I think that raises another question for me anyway, about the services that I don't have experience with, like TikTok or Snapchat. A lot of people report that they use these things for news gathering purposes now. And so I wonder, do you use it for news or how do you use TikTok to get news?
Well, TikTok is turning into something almost like YouTube or like a radio. Like anyone can post anything out there and hold their own opinions, and it can be based on anything. So say you wanted to learn the news and you go and witness things and learn about things and experience, then you report the news back to that, or you take the time to read the information and then you post about that. And that will show up on people's feeds if they enjoy listening to politics or want to hear about what's going on in the world. There's lots of informational videos, but also you have to be careful because are they informational?
So for me, my TikTok, when I go on it, I don't really follow a lot of the political debates or anything like that because I go on TikTok to look at food. I love food. But when I do come across anything political, it's usually just like a small clip from a debate that is usually targeting one political party, trying to make it negative. And so I see that, because I didn't watch the debate because I was working and everything, but after I got home, I saw like a clip of the debate, and I was just like wondering where the context came from, and it was very negative. So I didn't know the context behind it. But a lot of things like that can happen, because my friends, they also have TikTok as well, and they get a lot of political things, so they keep up with it a little bit more than I do. And with other news and everything, they get all their news from there. I don't, because I just never trusted TikTok to give me news, because it's you only get one side of a story in like 5 seconds, so.
Do you watch the news on TV, or do you read newspapers? Do you get news from other sources?
To be honest, I don't watch too much news on television, but the news that I watch on like TikTok and read in the articles that I've researched online, it's similar to news stations. Like I do see the clips that they pull here and there of the 5-second snippets being mean, but more so the news on my TikTok is like someone like a reporter actually reporting the details or talking about it or discussing what's going on, which could be swayed either way.
I have a news app that I usually go to. I don't usually read like the physical paper news. I get it, and sometimes I'll read it, but I usually go to my app and read the news on there. I don't even have a television in my room. But yeah, I usually go on my app, and if there's something I want to look at, I'll go ahead and look at it and read it through there.
I'll just note that I'm pretty sure Commonwealth University students have access to either discounted or free subscriptions to the New York Times. So you have options through this university to get these sorts of news sources. But that raises another question, which is how we define information or misinformation, because that's another of the key terms here from your question. How do you recognize misinformation? What is misinformation in your mind?
Misinformation, I guess, to me would be putting the wrong facts out there, like saying something that isn't right or isn't correct and making a bunch of people believe it. Because it's so quick to share anything at the snap of a finger. You can put any information out there, and some of the information may not be truthful, but many people will believe it. For example, I watched this YouTube video, and this was way back before all of the political drama. This was probably 2016. Anyway, they were making fake facts on purpose and putting them out there to see if people would believe it. So even stuff like that, where they prank you and put fake stuff out there, it's still displaying a wrong message. Some people will believe it, and then they'll continue to go on and share it.
Yeah, I agree with Daisy. Misinformation is just people creating ideas and then putting it out there. And a lot of the times it's very believable, and I myself, I'm a very gullible person. So I usually now, after I realize I was a gullible person, I try and not believe anything until I can fact check it. So I personally still don't know how to tell the difference between misinformation and real factual media, but I want to figure out how I can better do that.
I think there are several different species of misinformation available on the internet because, on the one hand, you have those who are actively trying to deceive you, like you said, to be pranked, to make a fool of you. There are others that might be representing a political party or an advocacy group or something and are trying to spin stories in a positive light for their candidate or for their cause. There are also those out there who represent foreign governments or who are just malicious actors who are trying to sow discord and chaos. But then there are also some who are just trying to make a buck. And I think that is the origin, actually, of the term fake news. Before then President Trump started using it to refer to the media in general, I know the Washington Post did an article back in 2016 about these two guys in Southern California who were working, I think, as waiters or something. And they, in their spare time, made up this website. It was called like libertynewswriters.com or something. And they just made everything up. And it wasn't just to be funny or to prank people. They made up stories that they could give provocative headlines that they could then share on Facebook. And readers would see the headline and it would make them mad, or it would make them scared, or it would fill them with some other emotion that prompted them to just share it without even reading it in many cases. And it would get so many shares and likes and it would go viral. And this would bring them really incredible revenue for their website. And so according to the article, I remember like the shocking thing about it is they went from, just living on whatever tips they made as waiters to pulling in like $40,000 or $50,000 a month, just writing fake articles and letting people share them on Facebook. And that to me is remarkable. In a sense, it's like a tribute to their initiative, but what they were doing was just so toxic and so destructive to our environment. They're taking advantage of people's feelings about something consequential, like an American election. And I think that sort of thing continues. I think it's one of the underappreciated aspects of this is that misinformation is really profitable to some people. And that creates a problem for anyone who relies on social media to get their news. But there is a third key term here. Having already talked about social media and talked a little bit about misinformation, you frame it as potentially a threat to democracy. And so I wonder like what democracy means to you, and if this is a generational thing too. I know they take polls on this from time to time. How do you feel about democracy? Do you think it's an important system? Do you think it's worth defending? In asking this question, whether or not social media misinformation is a threat to democracy, are you worried about democracy? Does this threat fill you with anxiety?
For many years, we have learned about democracy in school. I remember starting out, we had to write, I would say in 7th or 8th grade, we had to write articles about like our country and answer questions about our country, and that would go to a bigger thing, and they would pick the winner, and whoever had the best article would go to like a luncheon and talk about it and read it. So we've always been asked questions about our democracy, and from learning about this, I feel like I've come to the understanding that democracy is the free country that we live in. It's the system that we have right now. It allows us to have a president. It allows us to vote for the people that we want and have our freedoms, and also like keep things on track. Misinformation is a threat to this because it makes people disengage from their democracy. They don't want to be involved because they don't know what to believe. They don't know which facts are right and which facts are wrong. So they might just stray away and avoid the news altogether and not take part in their country.
I have to say I agree with what Daisy said about democracy. That's the way I grew up with my school, is that we were taught like it's the way our country runs. It's the way that we are our freedom basically in our country. And I feel like the big problem with misinformation and democracy is a lot of the misinformation that we see online, it's scary things, which people tend to, it's like a sheep effect. If one gets scared and then the others get scared, they're gonna kind of go together and then go in the same direction. Not saying that all going in the same direction is bad, but if what they're scared of isn't something to actually be scared of, then going in that direction, it probably isn't great. But it's the misinformation is scaring everybody, and it's not causing them to think for themselves. And that's probably one of the biggest issues when it comes to misinformation in democracy, in my opinion.
I think that the United States has become more democratic over time. In fact, I think that's the story of American history, is a country that was founded kind of explicitly as a republic, and that became more democratized over the decades. You know, we expanded the vote, first of all, from just like property owning white men to all white men, and then expanded it from there to include African American men also, and then eventually it was extended the franchise to women, and even more recently it was extended to everyone who is a citizen over the age of 18, which is pretty big, and that tendency would suggest that in the future we'll get more and more democratized. But at this point, it seems like this issue of misinformation and some other concerns about our system suggest that maybe people are becoming wary of democracy. You know, in order to work, we have to have a citizenry that is informed and capable of distinguishing between right and wrong, true and false, able to make good, well-informed decisions. And I think this social media thing kind of throws that into doubt. It's not even to suggest that you are not smart if you're tricked by something on the internet. It's easy to be tricked by something on the internet, and that's kind of like what we're discussing here. You had asked us in the class to read this article that was put out by a philanthropy called the Omidyar Group. And I didn't know what this was, so I looked it up a little bit, and I thought this was interesting. The Omidyar Group is a series of philanthropies that were founded by this gentleman, Pierre Omidyar, who is the founder of eBay. So he's an internet billionaire who also is basically devoting his time now to philanthropies, and he's also involved in this organization called the Democracy Fund that donates lots of money to organizations that are trying to shore up and protect democracy. In any case, his group issued this white paper that identifies 6 key threats to democracy that are related to social media usage. And I wanted to look at some of these because I think they're really interesting, and I like the way this paper breaks it down and organizes them in this way. And so I thought maybe we could just like talk our way through some of these and get a clear sense of what threats social media misinformation may pose to democracy. The first one they have on this list is echo chambers, polarization, and hyper-partisanship. Do you have a clear sense of what they mean by echo chambers?
No, I'm a little unsure as to what they mean by echo chambers. Based off of what an echo does, it like repeats and goes on. So I'm assuming like something repeating and carrying out.
Yeah, I mean, as I understand the term, it refers to the way that social media allows you to curate your content so that you only hear the stuff that reflects what you're already thinking. And so, like, if you have a friend on Facebook or some other platform and they're posting political stuff that you don't like, you can just mute them or unfriend them or otherwise close yourself off. And this, by that same token, if articles are being shared from a source that you don't like, you can just like block that. And the consequence of that is that you only ever have to engage with material that's patting you on the back and telling you you're already right. And that can be really problematic insofar as it contributes to polarization. You know, maybe I think that the people who disagree with me on politics are idiots because I only ever see content that tells me that they're idiots. You know, and if they have good reasons for holding the views that they hold, that's well and good for them, but I'll never see it because I've already blocked all that stuff out of my social media environment. I mean, have you experienced this? Does this influence your opinions?
Yeah, a lot of the times, I hate to say it, but my family kind of engages a lot in the polarization and a lot of the echo chamber, basically blocking out what they don't believe in. So then when they do get something that they don't believe in, they're like, oh, I already blocked this, but you know what, I'm mad that I saw this, so I'm going to go ahead and comment on this post, and I'm going to, yell at this person online about how they're wrong, but they're not actually looking in to see what the other person is actually talking about. They're just seeing, oh, well, I don't like this, so that post, that article that they have there is wrong altogether. They're only seeing the one part of it. And I don't engage in it because I try and see the bigger picture, but I can understand how people who are blocking the sites that they don't want to see and are reacting like that to the post, I could understand it as a human because it's you're defending what you believe in, but at the same time you should be looking at the bigger picture.
The polarization right now is kind of a crazy thing to think about because the sides are so far one way, and sometimes it's hard to find a middle ground because when they are only seeing the things that they want, that's the only thing that they're going to believe in. Like, why would they fact check if they don't need to? So it makes it hard to talk to them because they've only seen their information from one source. And sometimes people will get angry about that. They're like, oh, well, why is this stuff telling me all of this if it's not correct? And they'll get angry, and it makes it hard to be able to talk or share a point across if they're so far on one side. You need to be able to meet into a middle ground and come to a compromise to share your points and get your ideas across, which I think is very, very important that we do now.
You had also shared with our class this YouTube video, How the 24-Hour Content Cycle and Social Media Threaten Democracy, by a journalist named Ray Marcano. And I thought it was interesting how he was saying that if you go back to the 1970s or so, there were, 3 TV channels that carried the news. And so you got your news from Walter Cronkite or like one of the other two. And that kept people in this country on the same page. You're all drawing from the same basic sources. And so your sense of reality is pretty consistent. But then over the years, the first thing that happened is that cable news networks started to appear, first CNN and later Fox and MSNBC and others. And they were trying to fill 24 hours of news coverage with a nonstop flow of information. And they also started incorporating these like opinion-based shows that were comparable to the op-ed page in the newspaper. And then often it's not clear if the show you're watching on these channels is a news program or an opinion program. But this process seems to have started with the TV channels. You watch Fox News, I watch MSNBC, and that's what kind of forms the differences in our worldviews. And then it became, on social media, I follow these accounts, you follow those accounts, I block these accounts, you block those accounts. And in this way, we kind of funnel ourselves off from any information that challenges our views. And that might feel good for us, but it's also very limiting. And I know the political scientist Liliana Mason has written about this. She calls it sorting, where first we sorted ourselves into rival TV channels, then we sorted ourselves into rival social media feeds, and now increasingly people sort themselves into neighborhoods and communities based on who lives in them and who they vote for. And they've done polling, and people find that most parents would not approve of their child marrying someone from a different political party, and in this way, polarization is one word for it, but it's also just like the great sorting of people into different camps and rivalries, and it's not healthy. It's not a good way to maintain a country that has a shared sense of, who we are as Americans, for example. The second category in the paper here is the spread of false or misleading information. And I feel like we've talked about this one a little bit. There are different types of false information, and it gets spread for different purposes. But the threat there, I feel like, is pretty well established. What about this third one? Conversion of popularity into legitimacy. I like this phrasing. I think it's really evocative. It says the algorithms behind social media platforms convert popularity into legitimacy, overwhelming the public square with multiple conflicting assertions. In addition, some social media platforms assume user intentionality and conflate this with interest via features such as the autofill search mechanism. And we can talk about that too, because there's some interesting stuff there. But what do you make of this claim that social media allows things that are popular to appear legitimate? What does that mean to you?
Well, I believe most of the time you would trust the biggest source, like the source that's receiving the most attention, because the most people go to it, so it must be the most reliable. But sometimes it's not always the most reliable. Like we mentioned earlier, they might just be throwing things out to get like clicks, and it's clickbait. They'll get paid off of that, so they want the most interesting story. And the interesting story might get the most likes because it's interesting, but it might not be correct.
Yeah, I think the conversion of popularity into legitimacy, it can also be broken down into who believes what is legitimate. So like if you see a celebrity and they're like, oh, this is how this is. Well, if you are following that celebrity and you already believe in a lot of their beliefs, if they're saying that something is legitimate, you're going to go, oh yeah, it is. And you're not going to necessarily go back and make sure that that's correct. Or like a lot of the YouTubers, this is another thing where like a lot of the news comes from YouTube as well. If one of your favorite YouTube channels says, hey, this is, it's like say if they said, oh, dogs have 3 legs, and you're like, oh yeah, well everything that this person says is correct, so dogs now have 3 legs. Like that's kind of what I view that as.
It seems to me like an instance in which a democratic process, in a way, threatens democracy. Because this idea that the popular is legitimate is kind of like democratic in orientation. You know, it's like those, if you go on Reddit or comparable websites, sometimes the comments that get the most like upvotes get moved higher up the list, so they're the first ones you see. And in that sense, the people get to choose which thing gets primacy of place. And that's like a very democratic concept, but it leads ultimately perhaps to some pretty bad information. I sort of think about this with Donald Trump sometimes. I'm going to wade into these waters. Donald Trump is a very popular figure. He is, since the early 1990s, when I was a kid, I would have said he is one of the few people in America who is so famous that he rises to like American icon status. It's him and like Madonna and Michael Jordan and like a few others. Not just famous, but like so famous and so associated with some element of American life that he's like an icon. And so I get why people really enjoy him. He's a very entertaining character. He certainly has a way. He's popular. And that popular has conferred upon him a certain legitimacy as a candidate. And I guess my personal feeling is that the popularity perhaps is warranted, but the legitimacy maybe not so much. I want to just mention this too, because I think this is funny. The article here includes this thing about autocomplete of searches. You know what I mean? Yeah. So you go on there and you punch in like a couple words, and it like offers to finish your search for you. And I never would have thought about this as like a threat to democracy, and maybe it's overstating it to say that it is, but they note that sometimes the algorithms that run these things will press people to search for things that maybe they weren't intending to search for. For instance, in 2013, UN Women launched a powerful ad campaign revealing Google's autocomplete suggestions for phrases including women shouldn't, women cannot, and women need to, among others. The top results included women shouldn't have rights, women cannot drive, and women need to be put in their place. I don't know if you have any comments on this.
I actually, I love when I see videos like that because in kind of, it's the humor in it. It's not, I mean, it's annoying that it's actually like that in real life, but it's the humor in it where, like, you can punch in just any random beginning phrase and you can get, like, the weirdest phrase afterwards. So, like, I used to just sit there and type in random things to see what I would get. I think the one time I said, like, Justin Bieber, and then they were, like, there was a weird thing. I don't like Justin Bieber, but I was looking for something funny like that. But in the all reality of it, like, you can be looking for one thing, say, what is Trump's next move? Say you're looking for that. And then what can pop up is, like, what are Trump's next ideas? And even though they're very similar, they can get very misconstrued, and you can be looking at something completely different, and that could change your entire viewpoint on how you are looking at the politics that you were trying to go for. So, but in the humor aspect of it, I feel like those searches are really funny.
Issue number 4 in this article is the political capture of platforms. Open networks such as Twitter and YouTube are particularly vulnerable to political capture by populist leaders and their armies of trolls and automated bots for motivated use, such as to shut down dissent and minority voices, create the false impression of momentum, intervene across borders, or manipulate public sentiment. Of course, it is not just politicians and political parties that can capture platforms. Even established democratic governments have spent public money to manipulate opinion over social media. What about this? What about, like, bad actors, foreign governments, corporations, others, sometimes using fake accounts or bots to manipulate public opinion through social media?
We mentioned this in class. We were talking about the spyware and stuff, the terms and conditions in TikTok, how we have that spyware in there, and what can happen is other countries can put in random things inside of our feed, and they can be polarizing the viewers to believe what they're believing to mess with our country as a whole.
I think it's interesting to think that that's one of the easiest ways that other countries can reach us is through social media and our algorithms and what we're doing online, because we're online the most, and that's, like, the easiest way. That's where we're seeing most of our information, and they can use it against us. They can turn it against us to divide us and, as Angie said, polarize us.
Well, that's kind of the promise of the internet, right? That it connects the whole world. And so if you want to speak with somebody on the other side of the planet tonight and you have their FaceTime information or whatever, you can video conference, you can do a Zoom call, and we're right here. We've just crossed 10,000 miles in seconds. But maybe that also opens up bridges for espionage, bad actors to cross 10,000 miles in a matter of seconds too. And in that sense, it's like a double-edged sword. It can do lots of great things for us, maybe also open us up to new threats. Issue 5 is manipulation, micro-targeting, and behavior change. Unprecedented personal data captured by social media platforms enables sophisticated psychographic or behavioral profiling and micro-targeting. Social media companies today have troves of data that any government would like to access, and in some cases, successfully have. One use case for this micro-targeting is dark advertising, in which political advertisements are shown to Facebook users without being subject to traditional regulatory guidelines. Is it a concern to you that Facebook or TikTok or Google have tons of your information and they can use that to target you specifically with advertising, perhaps with manipulative advertising?
I think the data collection thing is kind of a little bit of a crazy thought because there is so much that they're collecting on us that we don't realize. Like the things that we like, the things that we comment on, the things that we buy. Every time you press a terms and conditions or cookies, there's like an article in there of things you're accepting that you might not even know about. It allows them to collect data and make personalized advertisements toward you. But beyond that, it's like very invasive almost. They can pretty much see anything that you're doing, anything that you like. And the people that have had a digital footprint their whole life, it's something that they have information on them their whole lives. Is it going to be a thing of like all the time surveillance? How much can they see? It makes you wonder.
I believe it's a complete invasion of privacy, but with the people who, especially our age, who are born in the media generation, like born into it, having it our whole lives, I feel like there's just no going back. Your information's already on there. Even if you did decide to stop being on the media, it's already out there. There's no coming back from that. But it's still very invasive. I feel like I wouldn't mind if it was just like I don't know, like the life that I want to portray outwards. But like if it were to go into medical and taxes or anything like that, that's like the private life behind doors, I feel like that just makes it very uncomfortable and very, very invasive, like Daisy said.
It makes it easy for you to get hacked and people to take your information that you wouldn't even think about.
Absolutely.
I think it's a fascinating issue because I know I've heard a number of student presentations over the years and things where they say like, this is a major concern. Your data is your property, but they're just taking it, they're profiting from it. And in a lot of cases, I find it kind of difficult to care because I don't necessarily notice the penalty that I pay for it. You know, it's like I click OK on the terms and conditions thing all the time. And it's like they could be collecting all kinds of stuff on me. And as long as I can go about my day to day and not really notice, then I may be willing to grant that that's like an invasion of my privacy or a theft of my I don't know what it would be, intellectual property rights or something. But again, if I don't feel the consequence, I don't think about it much after that. And I think a lot of people probably treat it that way. The other thing is that the official explanation for why they do this is that they're trying to target you with advertising of things that you like. And in a sense, like, that seems okay to me because I don't want to see a bunch of ads for stuff that I don't care about. And if they're going to send me ads for stuff that I do care about, maybe I'll find something that I do want to buy, you know? And they've always done that. It's why like the Pizza Hut commercials always aired at like 5:30 in the evening, you know, because that they want to put it in front of you at a time when you're most likely to be motivated to buy it. And this targeted advertising allows them to do that with like real precision. The problem is if the information they're collecting on you allows them to advertise you very specifically in manipulative ways, then you might be subject to the sort of misinformation or misleading that we're kind of talking about here. But I don't know that I necessarily would have put that in here with social media threats. Apparently it fits.
I mean, it could also be where they get you in the fine print, where you, like, I agree, I probably wouldn't change the way that I live too much. I don't really read through the terms and conditions because it doesn't affect me, and I do get to see the things that I like.
Honestly, I just kind of go psh with the terms and conditions because I feel like I've read them in the past. So I feel like I was concerned about it in the past, and then I saw no, like, conditions, no consequences, and nothing that personally bothered me. So then I was like, oh, these terms and conditions, they mean nothing. And so I just started clicking OK, and I still get the people that I want on my feed, the things I want to see on my feed. But I'm basically blind to the fact that in a sense, I could be stalked with my information. Like, I'm blind to it.
I was worried it may be easier for them to hide things in there, like to hide things that we wouldn't read. Since we don't read it, like, we don't really know what's going on, so they can get away with things. They're like, oh, well, you accepted this, so you can't sue us because you accepted it. But we didn't know that we accepted it.
Oh, and they know you're not reading it, too.
Yep.
That's why
I
it's
know
in, like,
you're not reading it.
0.2 font, and it's 4 pages long, and you're just like, just give me my update or whatever.
Absolutely.
Number 6, intolerance, exclusion of disadvantaged or marginalized voices, public humiliation, and hate speech. In your participation in social media, do you encounter a lot of this stuff?
Yeah. A lot of it.
Where do you see it? I mean, what does it tend to look like? Who does it tend to target?
Honestly, I'd say I see the most hate speech on Facebook. Because I'm from a smaller town, people care deeply about the sides that they're on, and it's not even one side, it's both of the sides. And they go back and forth with each other. I'll look in the comment section, and you can get on there and read for hours with your popcorn, because they're attacking each other in ways that you wouldn't even think. Some of them are facts, some of them aren't facts, some of them are insults. It's just a whole spew of mess on there. I do also notice stuff on TikTok here and there, but I feel like I've noticed more respectfulness on TikTok.
I feel like Facebook is the courtroom of social media. Basically, anybody who does want to be debating with anybody can go onto Facebook, find what they want to debate about, and just go right at it. Except for the problem with that is there's no judge. Like, it's just two people arguing back and forth, and maybe some people in the comments going, no, this person's right, but there's no judge saying, all right, no, I'm going to go ahead and put an order down, this is how this is. So, and because of that, because there's no end to it, there is a lot of hate speech that you see going on. It's just, because it goes from not agreeing on one thing to then going, oh, well, you're stupid, you're an idiot, like.
From my perspective, as someone who works in, like, communication scholarship, I think what's interesting about it, and what initially kind of turned me off from Facebook, is that nobody ever gets persuaded in these comment threads. You know what I mean? Like, you go in there because you have this thing that you want to say. You have to say it. You won't be able to sleep tonight if you don't tell this person this thing. And it's like a 0% success rate if the goal is to change somebody's mind, you know? And so there's a lot of research in communication studies about this sort of thing, what persuades people and what doesn't. And I think one of the key takeaways is that if you want to persuade somebody or have a chance of persuading somebody that something they think is wrong and they should think something else, at minimum, you have to develop a certain degree of identification with them, which is to say the person has to accept you as a reasonable person who they can respect and whose views seem rational and identifiable. You know, I could see myself being the type of person who holds the views that you hold. And the comment thread discussions just don't allow for that. It's not a part of it. Even if people try and do it well, you know, they try to be diplomatic in how they phrase these things, it just never ever works. So what's the point? You know, why do it?
The thrill.
The thrill of the chase?
I think people just do it to try to reason with each other. They want people to be able to see from their point of view. I mean, not always using the best ways of getting there, but they want people to understand them. I feel like they just need to come up with a better way to reach an understanding instead of arguing, calling each other out, and they just need to want to hear each other.
I think part of the issue too is the mediated nature of social media. All that really means is that there is a computer as the intermediary between you and the other person. And so there have been organizations founded, like the Braver Angels organization. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but what they do essentially is get people who disagree on a matter into the same room to discuss it face to face. And even though people may not be persuaded, they don't all walk out of there holding hands and on the same team, there is a benefit to disagreeing with somebody face to face, because you will interact with them in ways that are somewhat more generous than when they're just like an icon on the screen. And I think that's kind of established at this point. One of the things that social media has done for our democracy is that it provided a space for people to be awful to each other because it feels less consequential. Like, you can say something to somebody on a Facebook comment thread that you would never say to them face to face. And that's a problem, isn't it?
It's like when we were learning about cyberbullying, because no one's afraid. You can't see their reaction. You're not sure what they're going to do. And plus, if you're in person, you might think about it a little more. You might be able to see the person and realize that they're a real person. I think sometimes online you forget that they're real people that you're interacting with.
I think that that's actually a really big difference between why Facebook is a lot of debate compared to TikTok. Because with TikTok, you're watching a lot of people talk with a screen. You're seeing them physically talk. So they still get a lot of hate speech, but not as much compared to Facebook. With Facebook, you're not seeing videos of them talking. You're just you're just reading what they have to say. It leaves a lot of room to just go, oh, that's just writing. You're not seeing the human behind the screen.
So if we were to kind of wrap all this up and put kind of a bow on it, we're going into a major presidential election this fall. A lot of the discourse around it is playing out online on social media platforms. We've already talked a little bit about the different ways that can be harmful and misleading or misinforming. Are you at all concerned that this election will be compromised in some way by social media, and or that people will react to the outcome of this election in ways that are more aggressive or perhaps even more violent than they would have if social media did not exist?
I feel like this is going to be a rather intense election because everyone's going to be angry. I feel like everyone's kind of holding all the marbles. We're seeing who's going to win after so many years, and I feel like people realize that Trump might not run again because he's getting older now, and this is like the last chance for them to do something about it. So if they can't have him for the last time, it might get angry, or even vice versa, because if he gets in and then other people will be angry about that, it could go either way. It might make people want to riot because it's the one that holds all of the marbles.
I feel like we're still going to have as much polarization as we usually do even without media, but there's going to be a more aggressive polarization. It's because it's always been divided. There's always been like the main two parties, but now that we have the parties seeing just like some clips of things that they don't like and things like that on a daily basis, instead of sitting down watching a debate, figuring out one thing all at once, they're seeing it all day, every day, which can trigger the hate to grow, and so there's going to be more aggression in the opposing sides.
So the question you had posed here for the discussion was, does does misinformation on social media pose a threat to democracy? Is it fair to say that your answer to that question is yes?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Let me ask you this then. I mean, are you still going to be on social media?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, I want to follow up then, because I hear this from students all the time across my classes, that social media is bad for all these reasons. It gives you this, it forces you to participate in this social comparison where you look at everybody else's pictures and it looks like they're having more fun than you. Or it reminds you that they did a thing with these other people that you were excluded from. Or you're just constantly looking at people because they are fitter than you, or healthier than you, or more attractive than you, or richer than you, or whatever. And it's bad for your mental health, and it makes you feel depressed, and it makes you feel anxious, and it compromises democracy. But then I say, okay, are you going to stay on? And they're like, oh, yeah. Yeah, of course. So, help me understand that.
It's also a good way to connect to people, like people from my hometown, people that I'm not around here all the time. It helps me reach out and talk to them. Plus, there's also funny things on there that I like to see. It's kind of helps me take my mind off things if I'm not always filled in the politics side of it. So I guess it just depends on what you use it for. You have to use your good judgment and know to research things and ask questions.
I'm gonna stay on because I already pre-filter my feed to not have politics involved. And I am basically on social media for friends, family, food, and cats. That is, so I make sure to keep politics kind of separate from my social media profile and kind of do my own research.
Daisy and Angie, thank you for appearing today on the show.
Of course.
Thank you for having us.
This has been another production of The Art of Conversation, a course at Bloomsburg University offered as part of the Eileen G. Jones Honors College and in affiliation with the Department of Communication Studies, Media, and Journalism at Commonwealth University, Bloomsburg. As always, I am your host, Eric C. Miller. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you again next time.